Welcome to Edison Open Forum Cannabinoids 2021. My name's Vivienne Parry. Now, legalization, increasing acceptance and demand for both pharmaceutical and consumer products mean the cannabinoid industry is booming. By 2026, the global market is estimated to be worth $60 billion. But biosynthesis could take it to new heights. Edison Open Forum asked the brightest minds in CBD what they think the impact of biosynthesis will be and what's next for their sector. With me is one of those bright minds, Alexis Abraham, CEO of Cellular Goods. Welcome.
Thank you. Really good to be here today.
Now, tell me a bit more about Cellular Goods, because it's a very much a consumer-focused company.
Absolutely. So putting it really simply, we want to establish Cellular Goods as a leading provider of premium consumer products formulated with lab-made cannabinoids. Cannabinoids are an enormously fast-growing segment in the huge global wellness market. And I think the world is really only just starting to wake up to their potential. And within that, our goal is to deliver effective and research-backed cannabinoid products that consumers can trust. Many people will be aware that a recent analysis of the market in the UK has shown that the quality of products, specifically within CBD, have differed widely. And we're focused on bringing clarity to this confusing space and addressing the limitations of some of these existing products by delivering ones that have proven provenance and extensive independent lab testing to ensure efficacy, consistency, and safety.
So it's almost like, well, I know skin is one of your areas, but it's like the big cosmetic companies, for example, with a real strong tradition of R&D, but also the trust in the brand itself.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, a sort of positioning that we like to think of when we think about Cellular Goods is the science of well-being. And what science means to us is not a thing, but it's a way of doing things. And it means doing things in a rigorous, evidence-backed way and continually questioning everything and testing everything in order to come to an absolutely trustworthy outcome.
And that's really necessary in this field because there's been a kind of Wild West for a while, particularly with CBD products. You see lots in dusty corners in shops that are not that appetizing is the word I would use, but there's a worry, I think, about some of the products, and there's also been said the Wild West, people abusing the opportunity and putting anything out there.
Yes, I mean, I think that's really an inevitability when you have a novel space, and also a novel space that is frankly quite complicated. One of the things about cannabinoids, and certainly about biosynthetic manufacturing, is that the actual science behind it is quite sophisticated. And so in the process of trying to bring products to market in an enormous, at pace, in something of a land grab, I think many people potentially were operating in a space that they didn't themselves fully understand. And so one of the things that was incredibly important for us at Cellular Goods was really to hire the best and the brightest wherever they were in the world. And so naturally, some of our team are out of Canada, which was one of the early leaders globally, especially in the science and the cannabis space.
Now, tell me a bit more about your own background, because it's really driven the company where it is.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm a big believer that you have to play to your strengths. And I have a long history in big branding agencies, and I've worked with some of the largest consumer brands in the world, most recently at a big agency based out of London called Pentagram, working on the likes of United Airlines, the Savoy Group, and many others. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was that a brand, when it's delivered successfully, is a way for people both internally and externally to get an immediate handle on what a company is and what it does and what it stands for. And I felt that in this incredibly confusing space, which was clearly enormously appetizing and interesting to consumers, but in which there was great confusion, creating a brand that just stood out for quality, for rigor, for everything I just mentioned about what the scientific method means, was terribly lacking, and there was therefore a big opportunity.
What do you think has been driving this extraordinary explosion in demand? I mean, pharmaceutical, I suppose you could trace that back to changes in regulation and all those kind of things. But the wellness market is just astonishing.
I think, one thing that you can't not talk about is the pandemic. And that has really turbocharged the world's awareness of the importance of wellness and self-care, of finding every little, both big and small way to improve your overall wellness and well-being, whether that's work-life balance, whether that's exercise, whether it's other interventions. And cannabinoids, from the research to date and from what we're seeing with them, are seemingly on track to becoming the king of wellness ingredients. Whether that is cannabigerol, CBG that we're working with in skincare, which is looking unbelievably promising, or whether it's CBD or any one of a gamut of the other minor cannabinoids that we're also exploring. When you start to deconstruct the cannabis plant, we feel there is potential that is vastly both more accessible and appealing to consumers at large than cannabis is itself, and importantly, legal.
And tell me how you source your cannabinoids.
So one of the things that was part of bringing Cellular Goods to market on the main market of the London Stock Exchange was going through an enormously complex regulatory process and working really from the very get-go, hand in hand with the FCA. And their big concern ahead of our IPO in February of this year was around the issues of proceeds of crime. And the fact that even though CBD is explicitly legal, there is a question mark when it has been extracted from plant material, from the leaves, from the flowers of the cannabis plant, perhaps in another jurisdiction where that process itself is legal, but which would not be legal work to have taken place in the UK. And as we delved deeper and deeper into the industry, we started to hear more and more about cellular agriculture, which is, of course, where we get our name, and specifically biosynthetic manufacturing. And one of our partners, Willow, are manufacturing CBG through biosynthetic methods, and it enables us to access these so-called minor cannabinoids. And what makes them minor is not their lack of potential, but rather the fact that when you extract from grown material, you tend to have access to very, very little of them, certainly not commercial scale. So it was enormously exciting to start to go down an alley, which was both the ability to list, but also the ability to create superior products and more interesting products.
Were the ESG considerations, I mean, aside from the criminality and the proceeds of crime bit, but things like sustainability, because the way that cannabis is so often farmed in glass houses uses enormous amounts of power and probably is not a sustainable product in that sense.
Absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned, and as I mentioned, we believe that lab-made production methods are going to be a huge force of positive change in the industry. There's a significant demand from the public for companies to provide, the same consumer goods that they've always been buying, but in a manner that is environmentally friendly. In-lab production of cannabinoids releases far less CO2, uses less land, it uses the land more efficiently. There's no need for harmful pesticides, significantly lower requirements for energy, water, heavy machinery. It's truly a cleaner, greener, and faster way of accessing not just the known cannabinoids such as CBD, but also, as I mentioned, the minor cannabinoids, which we're increasingly starting to understand play some fascinating roles in upregulation and downregulation of different bodily features.
Do you think there will be a tension here? Because one of the attractions of cannabis is, or hemp, it's seen as a natural product, and biosynthesis is definitely, something that is not seen as natural. How do you bring those two areas of tension together?
It's a great question, and one that we obviously received a lot during the IPO roadshow. We're dealing in a novel industry using a novel technology, and I think in some ways one of the things that is in our favor is the tailwind behind science. The world has really sort of fallen back in love with science recently, and this is the hybridization of science and nature. I think specifically with biosynthesis, There is an education piece to enable people to understand that this is not new technology. It's just being applied to manufacturing a new, it's being applied in a new way, and that actually it's been used in the creation of vanilla, insulin, really an enormous number, citric acid, of everyday consumer products or components of everyday consumer products. And so therefore is really nothing to be afraid of. And in fact, is something really to be excited by because of, amongst other things, its ESG credentials.
So take us to 5 years in the future. Where do you think the sector is going to be? I mean, we see perhaps a maturing market where some of the Wild West element has disappeared. What do we see in that landscape of 5 years hence?
I think when we look a little bit further into the future, and obviously at this moment in time, we are absolutely focused on cannabinoids, not cannabis. So I'm not going to talk to the cannabis market. But I think you're going to see these as ingredients that are as well known as vitamin C in skincare, perhaps, or hyaluronic acid. It's very much going to be something which is not just accepted, but ingredients that the consumer will look for. And the only way in which to provide at the kind of scale that we will see through this broad scale adoption will be through biosynthetic and other lab-based modes of manufacturing.
So perhaps you'll get a complete divergence of the two elements, as it were, the cannabinoid sector, in well-being products, biosynthesis, pharma, and then the recreational cannabis, and that's again a different sector.
I absolutely agree with that. There's clearly space for both. There's clearly interest for both. We are aware that younger generations, as they come through, are less and less interested in anything which requires burning and inhaling. And therefore, my personal view is that the more interesting side, the more wellness focused and health promoting side is going to be through cannabinoids and consumed in new ways, whether that is transdermal patches, whether that is in skincare, whether that is in faster absorbing ingestible products. That for me is really the interesting area where one can promote health and wellness and do so in an environmentally friendly manner.
So that's the future more generally of the sector. What about the future of your company? How would you persuade an investor to consider your company as the one they should be investing in?
I think one of the key pillars is our consistent insistence on doing things absolutely in a legal and compliant manner. So we're going to be one of the companies, if not the only companies, with absolutely no legacy compliance risk. That clearly opens up all sorts of avenues as we move into the future. It enables us to partner with the really big players. And it also, I think, sets us up in a manner that will always enable the consumer to look to us when there is something new in the sector as the trusted first port of call does Cellular Goods produce that? Okay, yes, great. If not, when will they?
And it's actually what you're doing is really, to some extent, destigmatizing a market.
Yeah, I would totally agree. Destigmatizing and demystifying. And we are about to engage in a campaign of broadening the education. I mean, the education around CBD and cannabinoids has unquestionably moved on leaps and bounds in the last 12 months. But what I do tend to see is it's the same content that gets recycled around the web and across many, many brands. And so we're going to be originating a lot of content. We're lucky enough to have a lot of that expertise in-house or in-house at our partners. And we are absolutely committed to doing it in a manner which I always describe as never talking down and never dumbing down.
Any particular milestones you'd like to point out that are coming out?
For us, I think, and it's one that is clearly looming large, is the launch of not just CBD ingestibles, but also CBG skincare, and that's going to be December of this year. And for me, it was very important that we come out with 2 different cannabinoids, because having set out our stall as being the cannabinoid company, not just another CBD seller, launching with 2 cannabinoids, and in fact, really the first CBG skincare range that is being created at commercial scale anywhere, was a huge and is a huge milestone for us.
And on sale in what kind of shops? In just general retail, pharmacists? What kind
December, we're launching direct consumer, and there is a very specific reason for this, and it's because in this novel space, one which we both agree it needs a lot of education still, the ability to connect directly with our consumers at every step in the purchase consideration process, in the post-purchase. For me personally, I'm fascinated by the opportunities that direct consumer sales give a company in terms of creating a long-term conversation with its customers and learning from its customers.
Alexis Abraham, it's been an absolutely fascinating insight talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.